Here are a few of the worst cases of insurance fraud. Number 10. Causing more damage. Adam Haddard, a mechanic in Massachusetts, called himself the doctor of the collision industry. He had a body shop that was supposed to fix damage to his customers' vehicles. However, Haddard was doctoring the documents he used to scam his customers and the insurance companies. Whenever a vehicle came in with damage, he would damage it more to inflate the claim made to the insurance company. He would rip the companies off and also charge the customer for the extra damage. He was caught after an investigation opened in 2017 and surveillance footage of the crime was found on his cameras. It showed Haddard going around his shop with different objects hitting the vehicles. Not only was he charging for all this extra stuff, but in some cases, he didn't even fix the damage that he caused. Haddard made away with $170,000 from his scam before he was caught and convicted. He is serving 6 months of a 2.5-year sentence on these charges, while also serving 8 months for a separate payroll tax scam. This makes us wonder, why wouldn't he just delete the footage from his own security cameras? Since he's committing a giant scam. Number 9. Lend me a hand. 3 men in Sumter, South Carolina proved the length some people would go to for money. One night, after some alcohol of course, David Player, Gerald Hardin, and Michael Weaver hatched a brilliant idea. They would remove Weaver's arm with a chainsaw and file an insurance claim saying they were working as tree cutters when it happened. Yes, this is a true story. They rushed Weaver to the emergency room, but the doctors could not reattach his arm. After filing, the trio made off with over $600,000 for the price of an arm. Player was considered the mastermind behind this plot, but his plan doesn't exactly scream brilliance. During the investigation, Player showed no remorse and lied about where the $600,000 insurance money went. Hardin got a much lighter sentence for his cooperation with the police. The mastermind was also ordered to pay it all back in restitution. David Player and Gerald Hardin were sentenced in May of 2008 to 14 years and 3 years respectively. They were convicted of what Judge Cameron Curry called the most aggravated case of fraud he had ever seen. Weaver's IQ apparently is between 54 and 65 and sadly was dependent on Player. In return, Player betrayed Weaver for a quick buck. Number 8. Calculating landlord. Life insurance fraud isn't reserved for those faking their death. In fact, a Floridian woman figured out a whole new way to go about it. Joyce Small was a landlord in Florida who owned property up and down the East Coast. She had lots of tenants and presumably was doing okay financially. It's not completely clear why she felt the need to begin her scam, but she almost made $2 million off of it. Joyce was unique and a bit dark in her approach. She obtained personal information from all of her tenants using their applications. She would then choose who she thought was the most likely to kick the bucket. Whether it was because of health conditions or just old age, Joyce looked for people she could exploit. Once she chose her victims, she would take out life insurance policies spread across 8 different insurance companies. Then, she'd wait. Just 5 of her victims passed away, and she made over $200,000. If all 29 of her targets had passed, Joyce stood to gain almost $2 million. Number 7. Supposed employers. In 2018, in a little town in the Western Cape province of Africa, a woman finally hit the jackpot. The young mother of 2, named Palomfo Mohapi, was going to a new airport job. Strangely, to get the job, she had to pass a blood test. With her future seemingly on the rise, Mohapi never considered that this would be the last job she ever drove to. Her would-be employers, Melizwi Monko, Sifisili Pamba, and Pumlani Kwaseka, weren't there to give her a job. They instead traded her life for a big payday that eventually led right back to them. The trio used her blood samples and personal information to take out life insurance policies on the victim worth almost $2 million. Anyone that's ever seen a network crime drama knows the first thing police do is check life insurance policyholders for a motive. Once her body was found near Harold's Bay, it didn't take long for them to get caught. They were found guilty of multiple charges that included murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. To make matters worse, this wasn't the first time they'd done this. They attempted to kill another victim in Eastern Cape province and had policies out on 2 more women without their knowledge. They haven't been sentenced yet, but they won't likely taste freedom again with all their charges. Number 6. Get me a body. In 2011, a dead body was discovered on the roadside near a small Moldovan village in Eastern Europe. It was identified as Igor Vorotinov and ruled to be death by heart attack. His wife, Irina, who lived in Minnesota, was the beneficiary of his life insurance policy and received a check for over $2 million. Nothing seemed extraordinary about the case until 2013, when the FBI got a tip that Igor faked his death. Igor had been living under the false name Nikolai Patoka in Moldova. Irina got someone to open an account to cash the check and began transferring money in her adult son's Alcon's name. They transferred about $1.5 million to accounts in Moldova and Switzerland. Alcon and his fiancée were grabbed outside an airport in Detroit by the FBI after returning from Moldova. They seized his laptop, and after obtaining a warrant, they searched through it. The investigators found pictures of the supposedly dead Igor dated after his death. With this evidence, they began arresting the family, and they all pleaded guilty. Irina received 37 months in prison for the crimes of mail fraud and illegal transactions. Alcon got 3 years of probation for his involvement in the plot. The mastermind himself, Igor, was sentenced to 41 months in prison for mail fraud. However, the question remains, what is the true identity of that dead body in Moldova? Did the Vortinovs take this man's life to perpetuate their fraud? Number 5. Cow parts plus a mannequin. I have never seen a fraud quite like this one before. That's what Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Grant Gelberg said about one woman's master plan to steal millions. Jean Crump used to be a mortician before she became a con artist looking to scam insurance companies. She used her previously gained knowledge to create fake death certificates for fictional people and send them in for claims. Her schemes were rather elaborate and involved multiple people, some props, and even an occasional fire. One day, Jim Davis, a divorce contractor from Los Angeles, died peacefully in his home. His funeral was full of tears as friends and family surrounded his casket. However, the coffin was empty, and Jim Davis never actually existed. Jim Davis is a character created by Crump to perpetuate her scheme. She even held a mock funeral and buried a weighed-down casket to add to her plan's validity. Her scheme worked. At first, Crump cashed in on a $315,000 life insurance policy, although she was aiming for $1.2 million. Her accomplices, Faye Schilling and Christine Alexander, were arrested with Crump as her house of cards fell down. The investigation was started by the insurance companies and eventually led to a pretty open and shut case. The FBI had secret surveillance footage of Crump that stopped her at every lie she tried to tell. Alexander testified against Crump in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She said that she posed as Jim Davis's niece to try and collect the money for his death. When Crump thought the authorities were getting close, she exhumed the coffin, filled it with cow parts and a mannequin, and then cremated it. Schilling confessed to 2 counts of wire fraud and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. 2 others also confessed to being a part of Crump's fake funeral team. Crump herself was sentenced to 18 months in prison and was ordered to pay the $315,000 back in restitution. Number 4. The inside job. We've seen a lot of fraudulent crimes committed by policyholders, but what happens when the insurance agents themselves become infatuated with money? 4 criminals from Southern California found out the hard way when they were arrested on charges of fraud. Mohammed Kakuza, Margaret Birobois, Michael Monday, and Dennis Osickle were life insurance agents and came together in a scam worth almost $2 million. They used one of the oldest tricks in the book and attracted their would-be victims with a deal. They created a referral program where people got money for bringing their friends and family to one of these agents. Using these victims as personal information, the 4 submitted false insurance documents to obtain their commission. Their scheme netted them $1.9 million in commissions from more than 600 fraudulent insurance policy submissions. Number 3. The Hitman. The arrest of a daughter and a drug-dealing family led to the deaths of 2 people and a 25-year-old case. Anna Magia was arrested in 1994, just a week before her ultimate demise. Anna was taken from her home, where $130,000 in cash and plenty of drugs were found. Her own mother, Dolores Morgan, and brother, Ted Connors, had decided that Anna might talk to the police, so they thought that something had to be done. Ted and his best friend Jose Carrero went over to her home where she and her 2 children were present. They left the 2 children unharmed, but Anna wasn't so lucky. They disposed of her body in New Jersey. Carrero also testified that 5 months later, Dolores called him into the kitchen to have another meeting. She told Carrero that her husband, Nicholas Connors, wasn't happy with the investigation into Anna's death. He was going to hire a private investigator to figure out what had actually happened. She promised Carrero $50,000. The 2 carried out their plan and framed it as a robbery. The next step in Dolores' plan was to collect the $200,000 life insurance policy on her late husband and flee to the Dominican Republic with her son and his, at the time, girlfriend. Police quoted her as saying, "We already have 2 deaths on our hands. We can't afford another. We can't afford the police snooping around our house again." They returned to the States and moved to Florida, where they lived unbothered until 2017, when the case was reopened. With the evidence investigators found and the confession of Carrero, the mother and son duo were arrested in February of 2020. After a roller coaster trial, everybody waited for the jury's verdict. However, they couldn't agree. No matter how many times they were sent back, they always came to the same conclusion. The judge had to call a mistrial, and the pair's lawyers asked for their client's release. The case is still moving through the court system, with Carrero serving as the prosecution's star witness. Number 2, accidental drowning. On December 16th in 2000, 2 friends, Jerry Williams and Brian Winchester, headed out to Lake Seminole for some early morning duck hunting. Unfortunately for Jerry, he never made it home, leaving his wife, Denise Williams, a widow. His body was never discovered, and his disappearance was ruled as accidental drowning. However, Denise's brother-in-law, David McCrane, a Tallahassee detective, and Jerry's mother never believed his death was accidental. After Jerry's death, his widow collected a life insurance policy on him and married Winchester. Only Denise and Brian knew what really happened to Jerry that cold morning out on the lake. 16 years later, Brian Winchester was arrested for kidnapping Denise at gunpoint during a messy divorce. When brought into the police station, Denise believed she would be interviewed about her abduction, but the questioning quickly turned on her. Detective McCrane came in and began asking her questions about her husband's disappearance. He believed that Winchester had hurt Jerry and was going to hurt Denise, so she wouldn't talk. Little did he know that the whole case was about to turn upside down. When Winchester was questioned, he told a news story where he and Denise plotted against Jerry to collect the insurance money. He agreed to testify against Denise and tell them where Jerry's body was. With this evidence, she was convicted and sentenced to 30 years. Number 1, miscommunication. One man owed more than he could pay back and decided to play a dangerous game with his life. And no, this isn't the beginning of Squid Game. In South China's Hunan province, a man named Mr. He died when he crashed a borrowed car into a river. The authorities searched but couldn't find his body anywhere. He left behind a wife and 2 young children. When his wife found out, she took the news hard. Soon after, she left a heartbreaking note for her friends on WeChat. They'd agreed to leave the world together, and that plan was still in effect. Mr. He showed up at a police station on October 12th to turn himself in for faking his own death. His reasons were to escape gambling debt and collect the insurance money. It was there that he discovered his wife took her own life and the lives of their children by jumping into a pond. Click here to watch one of these next videos.